right, welcome everyone to Too Long Don't Listen. Today I have a special guest with me. She is a fellow Tunisian previous product marketing manager. Today her role has changed, but she has so much to share in the field, and I'm really, really honored to have Miriam join me today. How are you, Miriam?
I'm good, Sanda. Thank you. How are you today?
Doing great. I'm recording this from Tunisia. I know you're in Sweden right now, but I hope that this is a little special recording for you from your home
Uh,
country.
yeah, I'm definitely envious of the sun peeking in from your window. Here it's gray and rainy, so definitely not the best Friday, but yeah, we'll have fun today. So we'll make the day a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to talk product marketing with you. As you know, the topic or the focus for today will be specific aspect of the product marketing field. We'll talk about mostly positioning and messaging. But before we start talking technicalities, I'd love for you to give an intro to our listeners so that they can learn more about who you are and what you've been up to so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So, first off, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I'm honored to speak on a podcast hosted by, as you mentioned, a fellow Tunisian. It's not every day we see that. So, I was really excited about the opportunity. So, I'm Miriam. I am Tunisian Danish. My mom is Danish, but I grew up in Tunisia. And when I got my bachelor, I moved to Denmark to continue my master's degree. The intent initially was not to go into product marketing, but I started at GAN Integrity as I moved to Denmark as a researcher and developed an interest for the field. And as GAN evolved over time and became a sort of a SaaS company, it made sense for me to move into the marketing team. I've worn different hats from content marketing to campaign management. I've been on, bigger teams, or I know have also been a one-man team. So I've done a little bit of everything in marketing until I was offered the product marketing role in 2019. And that's where I really discovered a bigger passion for product marketing, particularly within marketing. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I live in Sweden. Commute to work in Copenhagen. It's actually not that far, just living close to the border, and live here with my husband and two girls.
I love that intro. It's the perfect balance between the personal and the professional. So let's, dive deeper into what your role is today at GAN. I mean, you mentioned you got involved in product marketing in that company, and you've been there for, if I'm not mistaken, 12 years. Um,
13. Yes.
13 years. Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So I think this is why I really wanted to discuss your career path within the company. I think it's the perfect example for people who are looking to first get into product marketing and then see how the role can shape over time. So do you want to tell us more about how you found out about the role and how it evolved over 13 years?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, my journey to product marketing is maybe not as similar to everyone else. It wasn't initially the role that I had sought when I joined GAN. As I mentioned, I joined as a researcher and moved into marketing, and actually got into product marketing as a bit as a coincidence, if I can call it that. But a good one. So I went on maternity leave with my second daughter in 2018, and the company has been on a growth trajectory since I started. We were four people, now we're 120, I believe, or a little bit more. And when I came back from maternity leave, obviously the company has changed, expanded, and the role I was doing at the time had moved into kind of has changed, and other people taken over that area. So my manager at the time, we were discussing, so what's the next step for me? And he suggested product marketing. And I said, I know nothing about product marketing. And he said, we'll figure it out. I remember, and I obviously was nervous. I was starting the function from scratch. And I always say, there needs also to be a culture, a specific culture to kind of embrace product marketing within an organization, despite it being a really critical role for companies, especially growth companies, startups, tech companies, lots of them in Copenhagen. But it was interesting given, starting from ground zero, building up, building relationships, understanding what the needs of the company were. And I think that has taught me as well that the role of product marketing, albeit its scope is very big, but it will be shaped by what the company needs at a given moment in time. Since I started in 2019, obviously what I did then has changed a lot to what I'm doing now. But that's also because the company has changed. So
Mhm.
as the company changes, as it grows, as it kind of readjusts, perhaps its ICP, where it's selling, what it's selling, how it's selling it, right? Product marketing needs to adapt to that and make sure it's supporting the company adequately. So yes, my role has changed as, different teams have grown. I try to make sure the role grows with them as well, so it's supporting them adequately. So from that perspective, my role has definitely changed throughout the, what is it now, 6 years in product marketing.
That's really interesting because I I think we already discussed we both worked with startups, and in your case you've seen it go from like a startup to a scale up, and it's your role is adapting. But can you tell us more about how does that translate into specific maybe tasks or skills that
Yeah,
you had to gain
yeah,
through time?
absolutely. So I think when I started, and again, building up the function, it was quite tactical to some extent. Obviously, we were a small team, so that helps put things in context. I think we were about 3 people at the time. So it was building up, particularly the sales enablement function. So it's a lot of creating collateral for the team, but also at the same time, of course, I'm making it sound sort of very, very tactical. There was a big tactical part in it, but it was also building up the bridge between product and sales, right, and marketing for that matter. So we were quite a dispersed company, obviously a global company, especially with remote work being, becoming very normal. Our product function is in Copenhagen, where I am, and a lot of the sales team and marketing team were overseas or in different countries. So bridging the gap between the commercial team and the product team has been key in building up the function. Creating also a point of contact, right? Who do I go to if I've got questions around messaging, and how do we talk about things, and are we releasing something new? Well, how do we communicate about it? Launching a product, building that process. So a mix of creating a structure for the function, creating processes to kind of systematize the way we go to market, but also creating a lot of the deliverables so that not everyone is kind of doing their own thing, which happens quite often in smaller companies and startups, right? Like people kind of get good ideas, run with them. And I think product marketing is critical in making sure there's consistency throughout. There is that thread between different teams. And I think that's where the strategic part comes into play. As the company has grown and as my role has grown, obviously, and this is one thing I enjoy very much, kind of as we perfected our go-to-market strategy as well, looking more at, the data part of things, what is our ICP, defining that a lot more. So kind of all of those loose definitions have become tighter, which has, of course, been guiding product marketing as well, right? So both being involved, but also being guided by that. So again, going back to how as the company grows, it kind of impacts the role of product marketing. I hope that answered your
Yeah.
question.
No, it makes sense, and it really resonates with me as well, because I've been involved in different parts and I of product marketing, and I always feel like there's so much you can do, and the key in everything you said, at least to me, is that you need to build processes. Like, your different teams will rely on what you put in place, and you're kind of guiding different functions. You mentioned sales, product, marketing
Yeah.
as well. So another question I have for you, and this is more specific towards positioning and messaging, which I know is something you're a big fan of. When you first join, like as a PMM in a startup, let's say, how would you advise someone to navigate figuring out, or introducing positioning and messaging to a team? Because it's always like you need to get your stakeholders buy-in first
Team.
before
Yeah.
launching. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Good question. And I don't think there is a straightforward answer, but I'll answer it kind of based on my experience and my point of view today. I think positioning and messaging are really important. Obviously, there's a lot of noise in the market. And if you're not able to cut through that noise with who you are and position yourself as a company and as the solutions that you provide in a unique way, in a way that resonates, you will drown in kind of all of that market noise. That's kind of one part. The other part too is when when you're selling solutions, when you're going to market with your solutions, you've got to think about that there are multiple touch points that the customer, in which the customer interacts with you as a company, right? It's not just that website page that you're building in the marketing team. And it's not just that piece of a one pager that you're giving to sales. It's multiple for the customer. They're looking at your company as one whole, right? And seeing all of these messages that are being put out, the way you're interacting with the customer throughout the different stages of the journey. When you don't have a consistent way you talk, you message, you reference your solutions, your company, how it is being a customer for at that company, the customer gets confused, right? They are not really sure what is it, right, that you are selling them. How is the experience going to be, right? And I think the word experience is key here. So you've got to think about positioning and messaging as a way that not only rallies the company around that message, but also rallies customers around it, right? And puts you in a certain category in the market. So people, when they're buying, they know, oh, GAN, this is what GAN stands for. This is what GAN is about. It's really hard to get to that, create that consistency in a company, not just because you've got to get everyone on the same page, but also because things are continuously changing, right? The product is evolving, the market is changing, the way buyers are buying is changing. So not only do you have to create that consistency, but make sure that you're also always kind of pushing the envelope. How am I evolving my messaging and positioning to meet, where others are, right? Whether it's the customer or the salespeople. If you don't do that and you stagnate, and trust me, I've made those mistakes many times, but key here is to kind of learn from that. People start doing their own thing, right? If it's not working, then they won't use it. So it's really key to make sure you always have your finger on the pulse. You're always creating that reference point for everyone. That's kind of one part. The other part, which I'll just touch on, is messaging and positioning are important because you've got to, it's not, first off, it's not easy, right? And I think we tend to think about messaging and positioning as, oh, we're going to talk about how great our product is. And many companies do. Mm-hmm. Many product marketers fall into that trap. And it's very easy to fall into, right? Because that's what you kind of lean into. Okay, let me understand the product. Let me understand what it does. And then figure out what are the features here, what are the benefits, and then go with that and talk about how awesome my product is, right? That's not why people buy you, or at least that's not the only reason why people buy you, right? There are multiple other reasons why they buy. And everyone else is also doing that. All your competitors are also doing the same. So you really got to hone in on what is the value that I'm creating for the buyer, right? And again, it's not easy to do that. You've got to really make sure you're understanding your buyer, you're understanding what they're going through, what is their challenge, how easy are you making it for the buyer to move to your product. Maybe it's ripping out a whole solution, influencing lots of people, within the company, etc. So you've got to really make sure that you are surfacing the value for them. And that, I think, is an exercise that product marketing has to do. They can afford to do. They've got the time. That's the role. No one else will do that because they don't have the time. Yeah. Salespeople will sell. Marketers will create, the marketing content, et cetera, et cetera.
So, okay, I want to dig deeper into this because I think value definition is definitely key to anything in product marketing. Like always need to lead with value, not features. Like that's something we always hear. But as a product marketer, I find it challenging to do so many things. As we mentioned, there's sales enablement, storytelling, being strategic and tactical through the product. And then there's, messaging to me is such a big component. How do you go through identifying and defining the value that you're offering to your customers? Because you did mention you need to understand your buyers. Is that something you see or you've done as a solo product marketer? And please, if so, since you're nodding, I'd love to know how you went through that process. If you can maybe simplify it for the listeners, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna disappoint you right off the bat. I definitely don't do it solo. So, and I don't think that product marketers should, right? Actually, on the contrary, I think we should be the ones who are always out there. I always remember this concept that I heard in the context of some training I did some years ago, and they called it nihito. Nothing happens inside the office, and this was pre-COVID. So, they didn't accommodate the remote work concept, so they might need the acronym. But really, the gist of the message is nothing is happening inside the office, or kind of metaphorically, right? You've got to be out there. You've got to talk to your customers, and kind of, I think every time I start my week, my goal is to talk to more customers. And the weeks that I fail to do that, I kind of say, it's okay. I've got another chance the week after. But I recognize that can get a bit lost in the day-to-day rush of doing things. But it's really important to keep talking to your customers, understanding how are you changing things for them? How are you adding value to them? Because they will give you a perspective that you won't get when you're busy with, in product, just kind of, in the weeds of that. So I would say, if there's one piece of advice, always talk to your customers. Don't be afraid. I know especially new product marketers, might be a little bit intimidated, and especially if you're working with big brands, right? Going in and talking to big companies and, people that have got a C-suite titles. But don't be afraid. Like I remember in my early beginnings, I used to say, look, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know everything. So I'm relying on you to help me see what I'm not seeing, and just be very honest and humble about where you are. So, and it's always worked. I've always had fantastic conversations with customers. Ask open-ended questions, follow the rabbit, right? Try and ask follow-up questions. I think having the right questions or interview questions is really key. There's a lot of literature out there on this. So I'm sure, anyone could easily find few questions to get them going. So again, kind of think about your customers, how you're adding value to them, and then also talk to kind of the front line, right? Your salespeople. What are they seeing in conversations? How are they experiencing customers, and what kind of the feedback they're getting? Your product team is also probably doing a lot of discovery, right? Listen to those interviews if you can't be on them, if they're recorded, right? Or get that feedback. I think that's developing a wealth of knowledge in terms of your customers, how they're using your products is key for you to understand the value. And then the last point I'll just add, think about this knowledge in terms of quantitative and qualitative data. So qualitative in terms of the stories, and then quantitative, if you can, if your product allows for it, look at usage, look at metrics, aggregate that to understand any patterns, any trends that even your customers might not know about, but you can, that gives you that additional layer of insight.
I really like that. What you also said about the reaching out to your team. I always say, internal knowledge is there for you to leverage as a
Yeah.
PMM before you go out there and speak to customers. Although I agree, it should be. I think every PMM should have a goal per week to speak to at least one or two customers. It's always it's always helpful. Like as you said, you learn things. You don't know what you don't know. I like that. So many learnings, Miriam. I do have one other question around your background as a researcher and how that, I'm sure, benefited you as a product marketer. Is there anything you learned as a researcher that you were able to apply to your product marketing self?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with you. I think it is not easy to stay on top of everything, right? Especially today. There's so many resources, and so you could spend all your time doing research. But I think if I was to give one piece of advice is understand who your customers or who your buyers, where do they go to look for information? Are there any thought leaders in the space that they often kind of reference or go back to listen to in terms of what they're saying? Are there any particular sites that they frequently use? Are there any publications that they would always read, books, whatever that might be? Obviously, it will depend on your industry, but go where they are, so that you stay on top of the latest information that they're reading as well. I think that's key, because obviously you're not a buyer yourself of your product. I mean, in some cases you would be if it's B2C, but B2B, for example, it's not something that I would ever find myself in a position buying what my buyers are. Maybe, never say never, but at the moment, I don't know. So I need to kind of put myself in their shoes and try to expose myself to the information that they're exposing themselves to as much as possible, obviously.
One thing I do enjoy as a marketer is stalking customers. So that's a great tip. All right. I think we're reaching the end of the podcast. And to wrap it up, my final question to you, Miriam, is if you could pick one tip to aspiring product marketers, what would it be?
Good question. I think I'm sort of, I think the one thing that I am trying to do more of as a product marketer, and that I would, share that advice to new product marketers, is that you tend to want to do everything. I think it's important to acknowledge that product marketing can be very, very broad in scope. And you don't have to be fantastic at everything. There's a lot of areas that product marketing covers. We're close to product. We can be, amazing partners to product. We can be great, partners to sales and sales enablement. We can support demand generation. We can be more strategy focused and support, the strategic people in the company, or the people that are thinking about strategy in the company, etc. But if we try to do that, we're going to become as they say, jack of all trades, master of none. We won't be able to master a specific area. So I think be focused, create priorities, know where you can make an impact. And then you can always move on to the next thing and kind of shuffle priorities later on. But don't do everything at once. I think you'll fail. I've tried to do that. It's not, it wasn't, it was a great learning experience, but you don't make as big of an impact. And I think product marketing can really, really be an impactful role if you know how to leverage it and and support the organization that way.
To me, that advice I try to apply every day, and it's a struggle. I promise you, learning to say no is something that it's really tough. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I hope people listening will also try to apply it. But yeah, Miriam, thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much, Linda. Appreciate the opportunity, and good luck to everyone listening and starting off their career. And I think it's all about learning, staying open. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity again.